Let's talk about growth loops. Growth loops are self-reinforcing systems. And what does this mean? It means that in your product, when a user takes an action, for example, they create some content, they complete a task, they even complete their setup, this action that the user has taken creates some value that further grows the system within your product. They don't just retain users, they are used to create compounding effect. But let's backtrack a bit. Where did all of this start from? In the past, we used to talk about funnels, funnels, and funnels. We've seen a lot of those diagrams that show how users move from acquisition to activation to retention to monetization. But funnels are painfully one directional when you're trying to grow your product, especially in this time and age where the intersection between product development and marketing and sales and even engineering is beginning to overlap. And so funnels don't do a good enough job in compounding the effect of the value that exists within a product. Honestly, funnels are great when you're trying to understand the user journey in a marketing section of a PowerPoint slide. Funnels are also great in understanding where users are dropping off to know which part of a linear system is most problematic. But growth loops ask the question of how do we turn one user's action into more users? So what started as a viral hack in the past has now become a prominent part of a lot of product strategies. Growth loops shape the onboarding experience, the retention strategy, how you monetize your product, how you bring in more people into your product, and eventually the product roadmap. Let's not see growth loops as one of those hacks that people have to do as a stopgap. It's a whole mindset shift and it's something that is worth considering as part of your product strategy. Now to the point of this video. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how I design growth loops from scratch. I'm going to be using a typical use case scenario to walk you through a thinking framework for generating growth loops and also experiments that you need to do to validate your growth loops. But I'm going to do you one better. I'm going to show you how you can create your own growth loops and a list of experiments in 1 minute or less using a tool that I have created. Now, you don't have to be a growth expert. You don't even have to be a product manager in order to use this tool. You just need to understand the product and the growth problem they are trying to solve. So let's get into it. Funnels are great in helping us understand how our users are moving through a linear flow across our products. We're able to see how we acquire users, how some of those users activate into key parts of the product that matter to the value proposition that the product serves to offer, how some of them form a habit by staying for a couple of days, a couple of weeks, a couple of months as it relates to your product. How eventually some of them start to love the product and they refer other people into the product, and eventually you make revenue from those users. But funnels, like I mentioned, are painfully bidirectional. We are only able to see how users are dropping off across every step. But there's a lot of investment that is made into a funnel that goes to waste. Do we have to keep re-engaging them over email? How do we make sure that we use the value that has been captured into the system to minimize waste? There comes growth loops. Growth loops is a cyclical system that ensures that everything that we invest into the system can be reused to acquire more users, to activate more users, to monetize your users, or to eventually retain those users so that we are growing in a cost-effective way that minimizes waste. To create my growth loops, this is the thinking framework that I adopt in understanding the things that I need to create growth loops and their experiments. The first component is what is the business goal that we're trying to achieve. This can be we want to increase the number of active users, we want to increase user retention, we want to increase how much users are using this feature. Whatever that looks like, define what that growth outcome is. That's what is represented in this quadrant here. The next thing we need to define is the challenges and the hurdles that we know are blocking users from achieving this goal? What is the problem with users not getting in? What is the problem with users being activated? And that's represented in the quadrant here. But taking a step back, what growth loops does is looking at the value and the resource that already exists in the system, and how can we harness the value from those resources to solve the hurdles and achieve our goal. So resources can be, what are we doing right now? What do we have that is working well in our favor within the system? Do we have some data that typically is created in the system? Are users doing some things right, even if it's not the goal or the outcomes that we expect? Is there some investments that we've already made? Do we have technology like AI? Whatever that looks like, what resources do we have right now, and what is the value that those resources could unlock? For example, if you already have users that are in your product and carrying out some activities, those are considered resources. And those users that are already loving your product, how do we harness the value from the fact that they are already in your product to drive more retention or activation of new users? So that is something that you have to map out depending on your product. Again, I'm going to walk us through an example so you see how this works in real time. When we've mapped out this growth opportunity, the next thing we need to do is start to brainstorm on what the loop would look like. To brainstorm features for the growth loop, it's important to understand that we're not just thinking about random features. We are thinking about features like a loop, because growth loops are supposed to take inputs, drive action, and use those actions as an output that also drives more input. So we're thinking of loop as a sequence of things that would happen in the form of inputs, action, and output. We don't just say, oh, we're going to create this report for user. We need to hypothesize, okay, if we create this report for user, then it's going to lead to this, then it's going to lead to this. And if this happens, it's going to lead to more of the outcome that we expect. We are not just thinking about single features. We are mapping out steps that we hypothesize that if a user walks through those steps, then it will lead to more of the input or the outcome that we expect. We'll see that in the example. Once we are able to identify the loops that we could potentially build based off of the growth opportunity that we've identified, the next thing is for us to then enable the growth loop that we've decided to prioritize. In the same way, product management 101, you're going to select a feature that you prioritize because you believe it's going to be the one that will lead to the outcome that you expect. Growth loop features also you prioritize. And of course, product management 101 as well, you have to validate your loop, draw out some hypotheses, and test those hypotheses. A typical example of a growth loop that is quite popular, but you may not know that you're in a loop, is for LinkedIn. In LinkedIn, when a user signs up for the first time, the user is activated when they make their first connection. LinkedIn suggests that they synchronize their contacts list. LinkedIn will tell users that based on the contacts on their phone, they are going to suggest connections based on user profiles and their contacts. But what this does is it prompts the user to send invitations to some professional connections such that those are also led back into LinkedIn to accept those connections. That is a typical example of what a growth loop looks like. A user signs up for the first time, they make their first connection. Even if they haven't made their first connection, LinkedIn could ask them, hey, can we connect your contacts, and then find people that are already in LinkedIn so that you can connect with them. And if they are not even in LinkedIn, you can send them an invite to join LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is also using that as an opportunity to increase their user base for active users by asking you to send an invitation to people that are on your contacts list that have not been invited to LinkedIn. So if you go through that continuous cycle, instead of LinkedIn spending a lot of money on marketing LinkedIn, they are using the fact that you connect your contact list to get more people into LinkedIn and more people for you to make connections with on LinkedIn. So it drastically reduces their marketing cost by asking you to do the work. And for you as a user, the benefit for you is you are able to make more connections to people that you know. Ideally, when you brainstorm on these growth loops, you would want to identify the hypothesis between each step of the link. So for the first step, we have a new user signs up. Yeah, they may do a lot of marketing to ensure that new users are signed up to LinkedIn. But at this step, the hypothesis is that if LinkedIn asks you as a user to connect your contact list, you will do it, because this entire loop is going to fail if you do not connect your contact list. So this is an hypothesis. LinkedIn is banking on the fact that you as a user will sign up to LinkedIn and connect your contact list. It's a hypothesis that needs to be tested. There's also a hypothesis here that if LinkedIn suggests the connections based on your contacts, there are even people that you want to connect with on LinkedIn in the first place. Because, for example, the people on my contacts may not be people that I want to professionally connect with on LinkedIn. So do I want to connect with them on LinkedIn? Maybe, maybe not. If they suggest and I don't connect, the loop is not going to work. The last step of this loop is that if LinkedIn prompts you to send invitation to professional contacts, that you will send it. If I don't send those invitations to people that are not yet on LinkedIn, a portion of this loop is also going to fail, meaning that LinkedIn cannot get new users from my invitation. These are the steps of the loop where, as a product manager or as a growth expert, you want to highlight these assumptions and hypotheses and identify the step that is most risky, the riskiest hypothesis. You probably don't need to test users signing up to LinkedIn because that's has to do with their messaging and their value proposition and their positioning. But then I think this is a very risky step because you connecting your contacts is not very assured. And so LinkedIn can decide that this step is the step that is most risky and they need to test to ensure that users would likely connect their phone contacts when they sign up for LinkedIn for the benefit of getting other users. And so highlighting the riskiest hypothesis means that this is the step that LinkedIn wants to test to ensure that this loop can be successful. What I want to draw your attention to is in this loop, we're not just thinking about one feature, we're thinking about a flow of input, action, and output. One can come up and say, oh yeah, let's introduce invites. But the way the invites are going to be implemented could differ significantly depending on how we want to enable these growth loops. So keep in mind that when you're brainstorming features for your growth loop, you're not just thinking of a feature, you're thinking of a sequence of input, action, and output that will enable us to achieve the growth outcomes that we expect. Just like we had highlighted earlier, the hypothesis that we are testing in the example of LinkedIn's growth loop is that if a user is prompted to synchronize their contacts right after they accept a connection request, there's a likelihood that they want to connect their contacts and it enables the rest of the loop. If we've created this hypothesis and defined what our experiments would be, what you would want to do next is to define the success metric for just that experiment. We're looking at the number of users or the percentage of users that synchronize their contact lists, and then the percentage of increase in connections that are made within a couple of days of account creation. How many of the users that we showed the pop-up connected their contact list? Also, of the people that connected their contact list, how many of them were able to make connections to people within their contact within a time frame? Because it's not enough that people synchronize their contact list. It's more like, did they make the connection? Because if they don't make the connection, the loop is not going to be enabled. We have to make sure that we put our best effort to ensure that the experiment is successful. So this experiment is going to be successful if and only if, one, it's a personalized network building experience that is offered to new users, and there's a value proposition of connect your contact list so that we can connect you to more of the people that you already know. It solves the problem of the cold start, like get on LinkedIn, there's no connection, your feed is empty. So there's a value proposition for the users there. And then the timeliness of the prompt also has to be right for this experiment to be successful. So you need to define all the factors that has to be in place, at least to give the experiment a chance to succeed. Once you've defined your metrics and the criteria for the experiments to be successful, you design what the experiment will look like. Typically, it can be an A/B test where you have a control group of users that you don't give any prompts to connect their contact list once they make their first connection. And you may also have a variant group that is shown the prompt right after their connection to connect their contact list. Tracking this over, let's say, a 7-day window. Now you're going to measure this metric both for the variant group and the control group, because at the end of the day, if the average number of connections that are made within 7 days is the same for the variant and the control group, then what was the point of the experiment? If users are syncing their contacts, but it does not lead to an uplift in the number of connections that were made, then was syncing contacts, relevant to the connection? So those are the things that we want to track both for the variant and the control group. And that's how we would run the A/B test. That is a quick, simple example of how I would typically think about creating a growth loop using the framework. You identify your growth opportunity that talks about the growth outcomes that you expect, the hurdle that is getting in the way of users achieving the outcome, the value that your product already has today, and the resources that are available to deliver the value. Once you have that in place, then you can define your growth loop options with brainstorming with the rest of your team. Identify the loop that you want to prioritize and identify the riskiest part of that loop that you want to experiment on. As much as possible, make sure that your experiments are given a very high chance of success so that your experiment doesn't fail just because you did not design it well. And then roll out your experiment and measure your metrics. Once you get the results of your experiment, you can then scale this growth loop across your products depending on the results of the experiment. Now to the interesting parts that I mentioned earlier. I have created a growth loop GPT that is public and accessible through ChatGPT today, meaning that everything that I've walked you through here, I have put it all in a framework and trained the AI model to help you spin off your growth loop experiments and prioritize all of them in the way that you can pick it up and run with it for your product. With this, you can do everything that I've talked about in less than a minute. And I'm going to be showing you what that looks like. To access the growth loop GPT that I mentioned, you have to be within the ChatGPT interface, and you can access this even if you're on the free version of ChatGPT. Once you're within the ChatGPT interface, go to GPTs on the left side here. Search for growth loop GPT. When you search for growth loop GPT, that's the only GPT that you find there by Detan. Once you click it, then you're able to start chatting with the GPT. There are two preset questions there. Each GPT can actually show you the kinds of questions that it can answer just by selecting that prompt. Gives you an idea. If you don't want to do that, you can also go back into the GPT. You can just select design a growth loop for my product. It gives you some responses. Say, hey, to design a high leverage growth loop, needs some context. One, it needs the products that you're working with, some information about the product. It needs what you expect the growth outcome to be, and also gives you a couple of examples. It asks you what you think are the hurdles or the biggest friction that your users are facing today, and what are the existing resources that are within your product today that can help power this growth loop. So I'm going to give it some responses, very simple responses. Let's say my product is a productivity app for Gen Z. It helps them stay on top of their work, their life, and other facets that they have to undo. The app, which is my product, offers features like task tracking, calendar sync, and even collaborating with their team, their friends on the things that they need to do. So that is the product context. Now let's feed it on some information on my growth outcome. Maybe my growth outcome that I expect for this product, which has no name yet, is that we just want to improve user retention. We're experiencing a problem which might be part of the hurdles that once users get in, they are not able to stay for a long period of time. They just get in, create a task, but we don't retain them. So we want to increase user retention. So the hurdle here actually is that we're not able to retain users because there's no habit formation. So we can provide some other information about the user hurdles. An example of what we could say is that one, our users are currently signing up, but once they try it, they drop off within a week because there's no habit formation or daily use case for productivity apps. And it also kind of needs to be part of their routine, which is not a part of their routine. So there's no reason to come back. There's no compelling reason, so they just join. Also, there's not enough motivation. There's no motivation, there's no social collaboration. Those are the things that we've heard from our users that is not making them come back. And so in this case, those are the challenges that is preventing them from retaining. And the last information that we need to provide is what is working well, what resources do we have, and what value can we harness from those resources. For these, it requires a lot of thinking. So growth loops need you to be able to at least see what is working well for you to harness what is working well as you continue to develop your product. And in this case, I can say the existing resources and the value that we have. One, we have a lot of users signing up via organic channels. We have strong SEO, some landing pages and blogs about productivity, about getting your life in order. We have all those things. We have some good app store ratings and rankings. Signing up is very fine, so our top of funnel is not quite broken. Task creation is very easy. They see a big blue button that tells them, hey, what do you want to do? So most users create a task when they come in, but they just don't come back. Calendar sync is also there, which is used among top retained users. There's just not a lot of them, because once they start to sync their calendars, then they start to get more out of the productivity app. And calendar integration seems to be a huge habit forming feature among very few users that retain. So these are the ways we can provide the context of your product. And once you have all of this provided, we're able to run the GPT and see what it gives us. So that's great. We've done our growth loop. So let's walk through the results that we have. It summarizes the product context. Yes, we already know this. It summarizes the growth opportunity just for you to confirm. It summarizes the existing resources we have, the value of those resources, and reframes them in a way for us to even better understand. Now, let's go to the specific of the growth loop. The question that we keep asking with growth loops is, how might this product leverage the existing features, task, calendar sync, social collaboration, and their value? It means that there's an intent and there's a bit of stickiness for users that eventually retain to overcome the drop off and build daily usage and drive retention. So we reframed the growth loop question, and this question in and of itself is what teams should typically be brainstorming around. So we are brainstorming around this growth loop question. So the first loop that it has presented to us is, if users create a task, then the app sends a reminder that, hey, you are supposed to do this task or you're supposed to complete it. And then once they complete the task, there's a reward, a check-in, like a streak or like a celebration. And then the user creates more tasks to enable recurring tasks. So this is task leads to reminder, then the reminder nudges a completion. The completion leads to a satisfaction and hopefully more tasks. So you can see that it's not just a feature of reminder, it's a loop of how reminder leads to something that leads to something that leads to the goal. And so this is going to build habits directly tied to the user goal of coming back to create more tasks and complete more tasks and be reminded and ensure that they are on top of their productivity. That's the first loop that my GPT has suggested. The second loop is saying, once users get in, nudge them to integrate their calendar in the morning, ask them to do a planning, and then they have like a visual sense of control and progress over their day. And then the user continues to sync and check in daily, so they feel like they're in control of their day. So here, it's leveraging not completion and satisfaction as an enabler here, but the fact that I get to plan my day and do some check-ins during my day that leads me to continue to come back to adjust things. So in this case, it's saying the user already can sync their calendar, and that would invest a seed of re-engagement because I can see everything in my calendar and adjust things within the app. That's the second loop that this is suggesting. The third loop that is being suggested here is, I go in there, I'm asked to invite my friend to collaborate on a task, then notification is sent to me when my friend completes something, and there's a form of social accountability and progress. So leveraging the power of social loops and the fact that my friend is in on this task, then it will lead me to want to complete and collaborate with them. So a form of social accountability and progress. And so you can see that these are not just features of calendar sync, completion reminder, invite friend. It's a flow of action that will eventually lead to the outcome. That is how we define the loops. And so this GPT also prioritizes the loop. And based on this GPT's understanding and some context that I've fed it, it prioritizes the second loop, which is calendar sync, leading to daily planning, leading to me to return and check in. And he also explains why he has selected this loop, meaning that one, it leverages an already proven sticky feature among power users, because we already mentioned in the context that power users will sync their calendars. users. So if most users are going to sync their calendar, maybe we should lead with that first, and that already fits into a daily cadence and support users that don't want to collaborate with their friends. So it helps with the daily habit formation challenge head on. And so here the metric that we're going to be tracking for this is the percentage of users returning on consecutive days after they sync their calendar, to see how that leads to retention. And so to enable this growth loop, we look at each of these steps. What is the hypothesis in each of these steps? So if we're saying the user starts by syncing their calendar, and once they sync their calendar, they receive a planning notification. The hypothesis here is if they sync their calendar, they want to open it daily for planning. The second step of the loop is, well, if they receive the notification, then they're going to come to the app. The third step of the loop is, if they come into the app, they're going to see something. Maybe it's about them doing their task, or they feel like they're in control of their day. And then the last step of the loop is, if they see that, then they are able to add, edit, or create tasks. So in the entire loop, every step between the loop has a hypothesis. The riskiest hypothesis that this GPT has identified is that when they get a daily notification, they open the app and they continue to use it. And so the experiments that we're proposing here is to launch a daily kickstart notification so that we test whether notification actually brings user in. The hypothesis for our experiment is, if a Gen Z user syncs their calendar and they receive a smart what's on for today notification every morning, that they will open it and they will check their task list and return. So that is what we are testing here. With this GPT, you're able to go from, this is a problem that we're trying to solve, these are the solution options, this is a guided, prioritized solution, also breaking down how the experiment would work and what we are going to measure at the end of this experiment. In addition, you can actually decide with your judgment call to say, you know what, I don't think that this is the loop that I want to prioritize. You can ask the GPT to say, you know what, prioritize this loop. Instead of prioritizing loop 2, you tell me to prioritize loop 1 if you think that that is the loop that is best. So the GPT is going to go back and also reconsider the first loop that you decided, and then give you an idea of what that would look like, also helping you to compare all the loops that you have to tell you if it makes sense. Now, if you decided to prioritize that, it goes ahead to give you a primary metric and goes on to give you experiment for that. I've given you a rundown of how this GPT works. I would love for you guys to go through it, test it, create your own growth loops for your products. Some of us have vibe coded our ways into products, and now we're stuck with, okay, how do I acquire users? How do I promote these? How do I ensure that people continue to do the things that I need them to do? That requires a lot more thinking than just putting out an idea out in the world. Let me know your feedback on this GPT, on this tool, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of this as well. Once again, if this was helpful to you, feel free to share with your product manager friends, and I'll catch you in another video. Bye.